Welcome back, guys. Thank you for watching. This is part 2 of the my Beach Boys weekend, basically. So I've been talking that this is the questions and answers that I wrote and took notes on most everything that was asked. And there are some things I'm going to be talking about that may not be news to you, but I thought it was interesting that they brought up this and that. So I just thought I'd bring it up and share what they shared with us and what people asked, because that's really interesting when you're able to ask someone you look up to questions of whatever you want, mostly. So anyway, I asked how they go about picking what's on the set list. And Mike said, trial and error, what works with some audiences doesn't work with other audiences. Listening to what the audience wants, edit to what complements another song. So they said, we're never going to do 409 and then God Only Knows and then Little Loose Coupe. It doesn't work that way, fortunately. So they think about those kind of things. And they also talked about, when we go to state fairs, when we go to casinos, those are your greatest hits show. And though, not the greatest sound and acoustics are there, so they're not going to do the deep album tracks like maybe like Ballad of Old Betsy or Their Hearts Were Full of Spring or Good to My Baby, which they did do the other night at the auditorium. And they discussed how, at those places, we just do the hits. That's what some of the people want. The management wants that request them to be there. And then when they get to be in an auditorium or whatever kind of stage, then they pick out some of the deeper stuff. So I thought that was really interesting. Mike also mentioned how they use the California Dreamin' music video that they made. It was in black and white from the 80s. And obviously it's from the cover they did then. They use it in shows, and I will get to that when I talk about the concert itself. Someone asked, interestingly enough, what about, what was the plan with the symphony? How'd that start up? They didn't play with the symphony with us, but they've, played with symphonies in the past. They said that Scott taught and writes for it, and writes the charts and whatnot for that. Mike said the highlight was performing at the Sydney Opera House, and he said it just adds an extra dimension to it. Someone asked, what's your favorite place you've ever played? What venues? Scott said Red Rock. I just wrote Red Rock, and I don't know what the rest of it is. I'm not sure. I don't know my venues very well. I don't know what the rest of it is. Is that a place? Red Rock something? I don't know. Leave a comment and tell me, because I can't remember. Mike said the Royal Albert Hall, which they do have shows coming up there here soon. Bruce said the Sydney Opera House, which we just mentioned. And Jeff jokingly said Joe's Cafe in Santa Barbara. But I think he went back and said either Royal Albert Hall or Sydney's Opera House. I wonder if he was talking about Smokey Joe's Cafe. They asked, someone asked a really good question. What is their all-time favorite song to perform? Bruce said, Warmth of the Sun. Jeff said, wouldn't it be nice? Because he sounds awesome on that. Mike said California Girls, and Scott also said, wouldn't it be nice? Very interesting that the two guys in the touring band favor Wouldn't It Be Nice. They asked what songs do they get tired of singing. Very interesting. And they said that's one reason this changed up the set list. That they change it up like every night, most every time, because they get tired of performing some things. Mike said he had been burnt out on rock and roll music. That might not be making it to the edit of what the video they're going to be saying, because that may not be the most positive thing. I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting. Maybe because it's not his words, it's a cover. But he does say it's really fun to see Why Do Fools Fall in Love. He loves that song. He really does. I think he's performed it every time I've seen him. And they also said, they changed it up based on the time for the show. I had another note about Bruce. Dig up a mono version of what did I write that for? I don't remember. I think it was a very powerful mix of pet sounds. That's what he was saying. Someone asked about the songwriting with Brian and Mike, how that went. Mike said he would walk down the beach, come back to the piano, and he wrote Do It Again. That was one of the ways he wrote something with Brian. It was a look back at the beach. And you guys know, everybody knows that story, kind of how Do It Again came along. He said that took about 15-20 minutes to write that song. The track was recorded at Brian's home, as Mike says. They mentioned Steven Desper making the effect with the bass for the beginning of the song for that drum sound. Someone talked about, Mike talked about how the lyrics of Kokomo, the first verse was by John Phillips. Then Mike wrote second verse and the rest of the song, and how he changed the "That's Where You Want to Go." It was, well, I can't remember now. That's where you want to go to get away from it all. Oh, John Phillips had some kind of tense. It was a different past tense. Anyway, Mike changed that up. I can't remember how it is. I'm going to kick myself when I hit stop and realize what it is. Bruce talked about he was 22 when he joined the band. Mike talked about how he wrote in the hall of the studio, California Girls, the lyrics to it. And this is at a point when Alan had talked about, when Brian did the production of California Girls, he was doing the track with the Wrecking Crew, and he had no idea what to call it, And Alan Boyd does the best Brian Wilson impressions. I'm not going to even try to replicate it. But he said, Brian said, I don't know, what the track's called. And then he's like, you're grass and I'm a power mower. That's what they called it, which is nothing new. I think we've heard that on bootlegs for years. Someone asked, give one example of when Mike took an acetate and wrote the lyrics and to the music, and then that was Good Vibrations. And again, this may not be news to anybody. I just thought I'd bring it up. What they're talking about, what they talked about is very interesting. Someone asked about the Holland experience. I feel like Bruce kind of talked about being there, but he was talking more about vacationing there and not. I don't think he was talking about the album. Mike was talking about Holland was a very different experience and it was very costly. And we know most everything, what they talk about, where Mike lived, and, go eat breakfast and how they were recording in the studio, which was very different from being in California to do that. Then they talked about let's see. The thing that takes the most time for them is to travel to each venue. That takes most of all their time, which is kind of crazy to think about. Someone asked thoughts on Sunflower. The Sunflower album, obviously. Bruce said it's an amazing group effort. Bruce also remembers Al Jardine recording car honking outside of Brian's house for a track, which I assume would have been like Susie Cincinnati. But, it could have been something else. Could have been Walkin', that song that's about a car. But I don't know if that was Sunflower or if that was Friends. That song, Walkin'? My folks have a friend who's got a little old lady. Her old electric car was just a little bit shaky. It's in a Darker Rudge getting there for years. Anyway, maybe it was for that. I don't know. Bruce also mentioned he had the greatest girlfriend at that time, so it's very memorable. Let's see here. Dennis coming out of the shadow of Brian for writing. We all know, 4 songs on Sunflower is amazing. And Our Sweet Love was mentioned as a favorite. And this will conclude part 2. I'll come back for part 3. So you guys just hang 10. Did I really just say that? I never say that. And we'll talk to you in a little bit.